You ever notice how life doesn't knock politely when it's about to shift? It kicks the door in. And the ones who don't flinch, the ones who already knew it was coming, those are the ones who heard the warning. Not after everything went wrong. Before. The truth is, if you're waiting for a disaster to realize something needs to change, you're already late. Warnings don't show up after the fall. They whisper before the storm. And right now, for some of you watching this, the whisper is getting louder. See, when divine warnings come, they don't arrive with flashing red lights and sirens. They come wrapped in silence and symbols and patterns you keep ignoring because you're too comfortable or too distracted. Life doesn't owe you clarity. Sometimes the warning is the discomfort, that unease you can't shake, that sudden tension in a space that used to feel safe, that relationship that starts to itch like a wool sweater you've outgrown. But what do most people do? They numb it, they scroll past it, they drown it in noise, or so they don't have to listen to what their soul is screaming in silence. The warning is always subtle at first. A twitch in the matrix, a glitch in the routine, one conversation that feels just a little too off, one door that should have opened but didn't, and then you hear it again somewhere else, from someone else. Same message, different voice. That's not coincidence, that's coordination. Two angels, two messages. One mission: get your attention before you destroy something sacred. But here's the real reason most people miss it. They expect warnings to feel like fear. But divine warnings rarely come dressed as fear. They come dressed as truth. And the truth, when you're not ready to face it, feels like an attack. You'll call it stress, call it overthinking, call it anything but what it really is: you're higher. Self trying to drag you out of a burning building before the roof collapses. You think you're having anxiety, but really you're in the middle of a spiritual fire drill. The problem is, by the time most people realize they were being warned, they're already in ruins. The job fell apart, the betrayal happened, the opportunity vanished, and then they look back and say, something told me. Something always tells you. But you weren't listening. Or worse, you heard it and ignored it because it didn't come the way you wanted it to. You expected comfort, validation, a sign that didn't threaten your plans, but sometimes the most loving thing the divine can do is interrupt you. Let's go deeper. Why do these warnings come before the shift? Because you're not meant to survive the storm. You're meant to navigate it. The universe isn't interested in keeping you safe inside your little prison of routines and expectations. It wants to break you out, rip you away from everything fake. And if you're not paying attention, it will have to use chaos to do it. That's why the angels come early. That's why the whisper shows up before the explosion. So you have a chance to leave the building before it burns. And some of you are right there on the edge. You're in between seasons, in between stories, and everything feels foggy, unstable, maybe even lonely. That's not a punishment. That's positioning. That's God reshuffling the map while you're still holding onto an old compass. The warning came, not to scare you, but to invite you to move, to shift, to choose to listen before life forces you to change. So the question is, are you listening now? Because once the warning has been given, the clock starts ticking. Grace doesn't mean delay. It means you have a window, a small one, to get honest with yourself, to disconnect from what's draining you, to pull away from the crowd that looks alive but is actually sleepwalking. Because if you don't, the next warning won't be a whisper. It'll be a collapse. And by then it's not guidance. It's consequence. Let this be your moment. But don't wait for confirmation that's already been given in silence. When two angels are warning you, it means the next chapter has already been written. It's waiting on you to turn the page. Don't make the mistake of asking for a sign when you've already been shown the exit. You ever wonder why the things you used to enjoy suddenly feel empty? Like you're showing up, you're showing up. You're performing, but deep down something's disconnected. It's not that the world changed. It's that you did. And the moment your spirit starts to evolve, what used to satisfy you starts to suffocate you. That's not a crisis, that's clarity. and clarity always comes with a cost. See, when the divine is warning you, when those two angels start whispering, you're not just being told to leave a place. You're being shown that the person you were in that space is no longer compatible with the person you're becoming. That version of you, the one that tolerated lies, betrayed their own instincts, silenced their truth just to maintain peace, that version is being retired. And here's the kicker, not everyone around you is going to like who you're becoming. Because when you stop shrinking, you stop fitting into the roles they gave you. And that for them is threatening. But here's the deeper layer. The warning isn't just about external situations. It's not just get out of that relationship or leave that job. No, the real alarm is internal. It's your soul tapping the glass from the inside, screaming, this version of you isn't the final form. Stop clinging to it. And what do most people do? When they feel that, they negotiate. They say, maybe I can keep evolving and stay in this comfort zone. As if growth and safety ever held hands. You think your discomfort is a problem. It's not. It's a message. You're not supposed to feel at home in places you've outgrown. That tension, that ache, it's divine friction. And the angels don't stop whispering just because you've decided to hit the snooze button. No, the volume gets turned up, the pressure builds. Because the warning isn't meant to scare you. It's meant to disrupt the delusion that you can stay the same and still receive the future meant for your evolved self. Let me put it plainly, the same mindset that got you here will not get you there. That's the warning. Your old habits won't sustain the new season, your old coping mechanisms. They'll savage what's coming. Your need to please, to fit in, to stay silent just to avoid conflict that's going to become the very reason you miss your elevation if you don't kill it now. The divine isn't punishing you with this discomfort. It's pruning you. And I get it, it's terrifying. Because transformation always comes with identity loss. Who are you without your titles? Who are you when you're no longer the fixer, the provider, the one everyone leans on? The answer isn't found in stillness. It's found in obedience. When the warning comes, when the message hits you in the gut and won't let go, you have two choices: pretend you didn't hear it, or move before the ground gives out beneath you. And I'll say this too, don't confuse delay with denial. Just because nothing bad has happened, it doesn't mean you're in the clear. Sometimes grace buys you time. But if you keep ignoring the message, time runs out. And then what was once a warning becomes regret. It's always better to walk away with your dignity than to be dragged out by reality. The shift that's coming for you, the elevation you've been praying for, it requires a death. The death of ego. The death of who you thought you had to be. You don't just step into your future. You shed your past. And right now, those two angels, they're not just warning you. They're standing guard. They're saying, we've seen what's waiting for you, but you've got to move. You've got to release this old skin. You've got to trust what you've outgrown. And if you're listening, really listening, you can feel it in your chest. That deep, knowing pull. That this isn't just another season. It's a crossroads. You don't get many of those, not like this. So ask yourself, is the person you're pretending to be worth losing the person you were born to become? You ever notice how silence speaks louder when you're on the edge of a breakthrough? It's funny how, just when you're about to step into a new level, everything goes quiet. People fall off, the phone stops ringing, the noise dies down. It's not a coincidence. That silence isn't absence, it's alignment. Because in the moments when God wants your full attention, He'll clear the stage, not to punish you, to prepare you. The two angels, they don't just show up to warn you about external danger. Sometimes they come to caution you about your own distractions. They come to remind you, if the enemy can't destroy you, he'll distract you. He'll dress the wrong opportunity in the right language. He'll send counterfeits that feel like confirmation. He'll cloud your judgment not with obvious lies, but with half-truths that feed your ego and stall your purpose. That's why discernment matters more than desire. See, desire screams, it says, I want it now. But discernment whispers, wait, this isn't it. And too many people miss divine timing because they don't want to feel discomfort. But breakthrough doesn't come in convenience. It comes in clarity. And clarity often costs you comfort, relationships, and even your own plans. Now this is where most people get it twisted. They assume that just because something looks good, sounds good, boom. But here's the harsh truth. Just because it's not toxic doesn't mean it's aligned. The angels don't just warn you about what's evil. They warn you about what's almost right. And almost right is still wrong when you're called to precision. There's a danger in being spiritually numb. A danger in being so used to noise that silence feels like punishment. So when the angels go quiet, when heaven seems to go still, it's not that you've been forgotten. It's that you're in training. You're in the moment where all the noise is removed so you can hear what actually matters. The silence, that's your classroom, but the tragedy, most people run from that silence. They fill it with busyness. They seek validation from people who were never meant to be their compass. They scroll endlessly, binge distractions, and call it rest. But rest without reflection is just avoidance. And if you avoid reflection, you delay transformation. Listen closely when the two angels are warning you. They're not just pointing to danger. They're revealing where you've been relying on false sources. They're saying you've looked to the crowd for answers only God can give. You've leaned on patterns you should have broken. You've depended on timelines you invented. That ends now. This is the moment you're being invited to recalibrate. To slow down enough to recognize when a door is dressed like destiny. But it's just a detour. Because the enemy knows you won't bow to fear, but you might compromise for comfort. So he doesn't always send storms. Sometimes he sends silence and watches what you do with it. Don't make the mistake of equating silence with abandonment. Sometimes God goes quiet because he's already given you the instruction. You're just waiting for confirmation you don't need. And the angels are watching to see if you trust what was said in the light, even when you're walking through the dark. You're not being punished. You're being positioned. The angels are drawing a line. They're saying now is the time to stop leaning on instinct and start trusting insight. You're not in a holding pattern, you're in a proving ground. Because before elevation comes separation. Before favor comes formation. Before promotion comes pruning. And silence is the scalpel that cuts away everything you don't need for the next chapter. You want clarity? Then sit with the silence. Let it offend you. Let it strip away your pride, your impatience, your addiction to control. Let it confront your false timelines and buried fears. Because until you can face the quiet, you'll keep repeating cycles dressed in new scenery. The angels aren't here to coddle you. They're here to awaken you, to snap you out of autopilot, to interrupt your comfort long enough for conviction to take root. And if you're hearing this now, you already know they've been speaking. The question is, have you been listening? Clarity doesn't scream at whispers. And if you're too busy chasing noise, you'll miss the divine warning that was meant to shift your entire path. You ever notice how life has this strange way of exposing the truth when you're finally strong enough to handle it? Not before. Not when you're still clinging to illusions or praying for comfort, but right when you've been stretched enough, broken enough to see without filters. That's when the veil lifts. And one of the most sobering truths you'll ever face is this: not everyone around you is for you. Some are near you, some are with you, but very few are aligned with you, and even fewer are assigned to you. When the angels warn you, it's not always about demons. Sometimes the warning is about familiar faces carrying unfamiliar motives. Sometimes the danger doesn't wear a mask, it wears a smile. It congratulates you in public, questions you in private, and silently competes when you're not looking. You don't notice it at first because you're loyal. You're generous with your trust. And that's not a flaw, it's a strength. But it becomes your weakness when you ignore the patterns. See, some people are seasonal scaffolding. They're there to help build the framework of a chapter, but they were never meant to live in the house you're becoming. And when you confuse temporary tools with permanent pieces, you start holding on to what God is trying to remove. That's the warning. That's where discernment must speak louder than attachment. Think about this. How many times have you lowered your frequency to keep the peace? How many times have you silenced your own growth just to stay palatable to people who never even clapped for your soul? Only your survival. That's not loyalty. That's self-sabotage dressed up as humility. The angels aren't just pointing to people, they're pointing to energy, environments, habits, agreements you've made in silence, unspoken contracts that say, as long as I don't outgrow you, you won't leave me. But the cost of staying small for the sake of acceptance is spiritual bankruptcy. You cannot keep feeding what is starving your spirit. Here's the twist: most of the betrayal doesn't come when you're weak. It comes when you're evolving. When your light starts piercing the spaces that were comfortable in your darkness. That's when the mask starts slipping. That's when the jokes start sounding like jabs. That's when the silence from those who once praised you becomes louder than their words ever were. And if you're not careful, you'll take their withdrawal personally. But don't. The angelic warning isn't they hate you. It's deeper. It's they can't go where you're going. Not because they're bad. Some of them are good people. Kind even. But kindness isn't the same as compatibility. They were sent to walk with a version of you that no longer exists. The grief and growth isn't just about what you gain, it's what you outgrow. And what you must bury while still breathing. You'll be asked to mourn people who are still alive, situations that are still functional, relationships that still feel comfortable. But if it's not aligned anymore, it's a weight disguised as a wing. Here's where people fall asleep. They confuse loyalty with alignment. They stay connected to dysfunction out of memory, not mission. But God isn't moved by your nostalgia, He's moved by your obedience. When He sends angels to warn you, they're not here to validate your feelings. They're here to protect your future. And that means they'll push you to let go of hands that are holding you back, even if those hands once carried you. Now, if this makes you uncomfortable, good. Growth isn't a gentle process. It's violent to your old identity. It rips the masks, exposes the codependency, and calls out the lies you've made livable. But what's on the other side of that exposure? Liberation. That unshakable peace that comes from knowing you're no longer pretending to fit where you've outgrown. So when the angels warn you about misaligned connections, listen. They're not just saving you from pain, they're saving you for sagging. Because the longer you entertain what you've outgrown, the longer you postpone what's been prepared. And make no mistake, your next level is allergic to your last season's baggage. What worked then will wound you now. Stop feeding what's no longer meant to survive in your life. Let the warning awaken you not just to what's around you, but to what you've been tolerating within you. Because when you finally release what's not aligned, you make room for what's been divinely assigned. You ever wonder why some blessings feel delayed? Why you seem to be stuck in this limbo between what God showed you and what you're actually experiencing? It's not because the promise disappeared, it's because you're being held in position until you're ready to handle it without self-destructing. Sometimes the angels aren't rushing to rescue you, they're watching, quietly intervening when necessary, but mostly observing how you move in the in-between. Because that's where the real test is. See, people always talk about the promise. They glorify the outcome, the elevation, the open doors. But they rarely talk about the waiting room. That space where nothing makes sense, where you're doing everything right, praying, working, showing up, and yet it still feels like you're being overlooked. You're not. You're being observed, not by people, by the divine. By the two angels warning you not to blow your own future by reacting out of desperation. Desperation is dangerous. It dresses itself up as passion sometimes, or urgency, or even faith. But what it really is at its core is fear in disguise. Fear that says, if I don't move now, I'll miss it. Fear that says, I don't accept this offer, I'll never get another. Fear that causes you to settle for less just to escape the discomfort of waiting. And every time you act from that space, you shrink the promise. Not because God changes His mind, but because you alter the terms of the agreement with your impatience. Now here's the twist: not every delay is demonic. Some delays are divine. Because if God gave it to you now, in your current mindset, you'd sabotage it. You'd treat it like your last opportunity instead of your next evolution. You'd mix old fears into new soil and wonder why the fruit turns bitter. The angels see this. They're not withholding the blessing, they're protecting it from your unhealed parts.